Sycamore that I am using for the bowl I just turned. To give you an idea of how punky and really rot, it's really rotted. But I wanted to save it because it had some beautiful grain, and it wasn't the only piece that I had rough turned that day. I rough turned several of them, and some of them I can just stick my gouge straight through the bowl. Like, I hollowed it out, did all of it, and then got to these really gray areas, and they were rotten. So I'm going to show you the 2 chunks of sycamore that I was blessed to have. The sycamore tree was cut down over a year ago, and the tree was just laying in the yard, so that's another reason why it's really punky. It wasn't freshly cut, and it was still very moist because of the fact that it is rotting. It's a lot of moisture in it. Ignore my messy backyard with my graveyard of wood. So this is one of the logs, and as you can tell, I mean, just looking at it here, that is just super punky. I can pull that out with my fingernail. I've had a woodpecker realize that there's a lot of grub worms in this piece, so I have a woodpecker that comes and etches away at it for me here lately. And here's this one's a lot larger. It's pretty good size, that I'm hoping that we'll have some little better condition wood. I mean, so I understand some of these pieces would be too far gone for some turners because of the products available to you, or whatever. But if it is worth it, if the piece is beautiful and you feel that it's worth it, you know, go for it. Buy some epoxy and, you know, resin, add acetone to it, or wood hardener. You can use wood hardener. I don't know if this punky of this particular wood would have worked if I used Elmer's glue. I think it was a lot of pieces in it were close to mush. When I was sanding this bowl, there was a lot of areas where my sandpaper was just taking chunks out, and other areas it was just, you know, nice and smooth like normal sanding. So that was, even after several coats of my poor man's stabilization, I had a rough time keeping that one together, but it was beautiful. It turned out in the end, and I learned a lot from the process. So just to give you an idea what I'm starting with this bowl, and the reason why I had to coat it so much with the acetone and resin was literally just so it would stay together. And the bottom I had to coat a couple coats as well. In the video only showed my 1 coat for the very bottom, but I did 2 additional coats because it was just sucking it right up. I mean, very punky, very dry sycamore. Has beautiful spalting in it, very beautiful spalting, and that's you know, one of the things that us turners, we really enjoy turning spalted wood, but it does pose challenges in itself. So some woods, if it spalts, it's because it's like almost gone. I don't understand why. I don't know the whole technical aspects and stuff about spalted woods. Oak tends to stay together pretty good, that with my experience with spalting. And yeah, so that's what we're starting with, to give you an idea of the condition of the wood as I was roughing them out. Like I said, the wood was dry. It was dry, but it wasn't dry. Like, it wasn't dry because it's starting to rot. You know what I mean? Like that kind of moisture in the piece from the punky rot. So yeah, so that's why I rough turned it and then waited a few months for it to dry out a little bit more. Plus, so that way I knew I was going to need to add the resin and acetone mixture, the poor man stabilization process on it, and I didn't want it to be too wet and, you know, cause air bubbles or issues or whatever with the resin. So that's why I chose to turn it. I probably could have just, if it was in better condition, I could have just turned it start to finish the first time I turned it. But anyways, that's that. I hope you guys enjoy the video. God bless. With all of my large pieces that I turn, I like to use a faceplate. With this spalted wood, I was kind of worried that it would be in that really loose grain, but being that I mounted it on the pith side, the center side of the tree, you know, there was a little bit more meat and solid wood to hold on to, so it wasn't too bad. But just to be cautious when you're mounting, you know, regardless to how you're mounting blanks of punky woods, because it can come loose on you, and that's the last thing you want is this big old chunk flying across the room at you. Now I'm just roughing out this bowl, and roughing out means that I'm turning it in sort of the kind of shape that I'd like, leaving it really thick. It is 10% of the total diameter is what you want to leave as far as meat on it, so you can return it. It helps the wood to dry a lot faster than leaving it into log form, and you can, you know, seal it or whatever else and control its drying a lot easier when there's less wood to control. So those of you who have some wet wood laying around and not sure what to do with it, I recommend turning a few pieces of whatever wood you have wet, because one, for beginners or even for someone who has turned for a long time and you want to get an idea of what the wood will do when it's wet. Some people might think it's a waste of time, but I like turning wet wood, and I like to, like I said in the other video, I like to see what I can get away with, see how far I can push the wood, and see what I can do with it wet. And then rough cut some the rest of it or whatever you have, and set it on a shelf, seal it up really good. In Florida, I cannot wrap these. I can't leave them in shavings longer than a week because they will start to mold. Matter of fact, I left this in shavings when I was finished for about 3 or 4 days, and the bottom of it started to mold very quickly. So even when it was cooler outside, it was January when I had rough turned this, I still had quite a bit of moisture, and I had to pull it out and just throw it in my woodshed, which is a little drier in there and has some airflow, but so far I haven't had any issues with mold. So that's what I end up having to do. You can seal these with wax, you can seal them with anchor seal after you're done rough cutting them. There's a ton of videos on how to process and rough out bowls. I would definitely recommend, if you are new to roughing out, doing that, looking up videos and how the different methods, because everyone has their own method they like to use, and I just share what I do. I don't know or have perfected everyone's method, so it's just, I try to use whatever I have on hand, whatever's the cheapest, especially since this is free wood, so I'm not too concerned about if it cracks or whatever else. Plus I have resin that's accessible to me, so I can always fill the cracks with resin. There's different factors in the reason why I make the decisions the way I do, and everybody's situation is going to be unique and different, and I would just try to find the method that works best for you, your budget, your environment, and you know, your accessibility to wood, period. So I just, like I said, I just rough them out. I'll seal them with either, you can use Elmer's glue. Yes, I know some people are like, no, that doesn't work. I've used Elmer's glue. I've used wood glue watered down to seal them. You know, it's the method's not really designed to completely eliminate the possibility of cracks. It's not a foolproof. I don't think any method is really a foolproof. It's to eliminate a lot of the possibility, but not any possibility. It slows down the drying time, so it will eliminate some cracks, and some you'll get warping, and you'll definitely get warping. With this piece, I didn't get too much warping because it was already mostly dry. It was just those punky, spalted areas, like I said, that was holding on to the moisture because it was rotting, that held on to the moisture. I would recommend, if you are going to start roughing out bowls and stuff, to get a moisture meter. They have them at Harbor Freight for $12 or maybe even less. I use my coupon. So
so that way you can tell what the moisture is when you rough it out, and then when you go back, you can always write the moisture on the bottom of it, and then when you go back to return it, you have an idea of how fast it's drying. So if you have other blanks that you cut at the same time, you can kind of gauge on whether they're ready or if they need to sit a little longer. There are also many methods of drying these blanks faster. You can use kitty litter, you can use denatured alcohol. Like I said, just look on YouTube for several different methods on drying your blanks if you want to do them quicker, and you should be able to get lots of information there. That'll help you out. I don't use any method other than sitting them on the shelf right now. So that's my method, but there are many others. Just pick what best fits your budget. I'm just throwing these in the shavings when I'm done because I had several other bowls I was roughing out that day, so I couldn't get to it right away. This piece is just a like a waste block that I hot glued a foam pad that I got from the Dollar Tree. It's a gardening pad for your knees, I guess, so when you're gardening, and cut circles out, hot glued it to a waste block so that way I can turn this bowl. Again, usually when you rough cut, you want to find a way to mount them back on the lathe so you can return the tenon. So already this blank I had coated in the acetone and resin mixture. That's why it looks darker, like it already has a finish on it. I set the camera up out to record it, but unfortunately I just didn't push record, so it didn't record me doing that. Right now, before I start trying to finish turning it, I'm adding some fast set resin with some black coloring to it to kind of like mimic the spalting in it. I had a lot of really deep, pitty, chunks in it, and I didn't want to have to cut too much off because I did start out with kind of a thinner blank to begin with. So I'm just doing that to kind of like re-stabilize it again, I guess, and turn it around to finish shaping the outside of it. I put this tailstock up because this is punky wood, and you want, even though there's not a lot of meat on it, you do want the support because you're pretty much cutting, a hollowed piece of wood, and you'll notice as you're doing the outside rim, it gets, it starts to sound a little different. So just be cautious with that. Stop the lathe every so often, make sure there's no cracks or craziness going on so that doesn't fly apart on you. I'm using CA glue on some of the areas that look like they're cracked. I'm just, trying to keep things together. And, honestly, at this point in the turn, I was thinking, my word, what in the heck did I step myself off into? Can of worms did I open? I already knew by this point that I was going to have to do another coat of the acetone and resin, just because I knew if I started to sand, that this was just, it was just going to be impossible to smooth. And as sharp as my tools are, as fast as I'm turning this punky wood, it just rakes out in chunks. And I forgot to mention the last video I posted with the vase, the hollow form at the lid. This is the same exact wood, but I used a branch. So all of this is the same age, the same punky rot that's going on. Beautiful grain. So this piece was more of a challenge than that vase, even though I had to coat it with the same resin and acetone mixture. So the process of this is, instead of coating it with resin and acetone again and then sanding it, I decided to go ahead and sand it, get it all as smooth as I possibly could. It was funny because especially in some areas, I could sand and it was just sanding almost, I feel like I could sand right through the bowl. it was rough. I sanded to, I think, 320, and then denatured alcohol to clean it off, and I used the fast set. This time I did not use acetone in with it. I just did the fast set resin, painted on, because my intentions were just to fill some of the, you know, smaller, pittier spots to stabilize the wood, make it a little harder, more durable, and then go back and sand it and do a final finish on it. So I'm just doing the bottom part. It's not finished yet. Didn't take tenon off. I haven't finished it. I'm just making sure I get the bottom area really good and coated, so when I put it back on the lathe, I'm not having to do the whole bottom in a complete separate process, I guess. So set that out to dry for most of the day, just so it was good and cured. But you can see how quickly the resin is just like zoop, soaking up in there. So later the afternoon, I went ahead and just finished sanding it, sanded it all the way to 400. I don't show all of my sanding process because it was just boring. I did buy some new 3-inch sanding pads, which are very nice when working with bigger bowls. Wiping everything down with denatured alcohol. Use the Satilla abrasive paste, and you know, to just give it a nice smooth finish. And then I used the Frenchies polish after that to give it a final finish. This is obviously not going to be food safe bowl because as much resin that I had to put on it, the denatured alcohol, all those things. So it is definitely a decorative piece. Make sure you put a little spot or nub or an indent in your tenons before you take them off, so that a way you can reposition your bowl. That's very, very helpful, and I've done it a few times without doing it, and taking that extra step has saved me a lot. So I use the same foam pad to turn the bowl around to take the tenon off. And as Punky, I should have known better. I took a big old chunk out when I was trying to get that little nub off. I figured it would just pop right off very easily, but it took a huge chunk. So I just used the sand, you know, the stuff. My camera battery actually went dead during this process, but I used the dust and some medium CA glue and used it as kind of like a wood filler. So I had already sanded that all down and put a new battery, or charge my battery so I can finish recording. Sanded and branded. Now I'm putting the fast set resin on again for the bottom to seal it up really good, like I did the rest, and it soaked it up. So I had to add 2 more coats after this completely dried and cured. And so that's that. That was a definite challenge and fun, and I learned a lot from the process, and I think it was worth it. The bowl is beautiful grain, and I'm happy that I was able to savor. Anyways, y'all stay safe, stay healthy, and praying for everyone. You guys have a blessed weekend, and God bless.